Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep, his cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. They may be more likely to go to heaven, yet at the same time likelier to make a hell of earth. This very kindness stings with intolerable insult. To be cured against one's will and cured of states which we may not regard as disease is to be put on a level of those who have not yet reached the age of reason, or those who never will, to be classed with infants, imbeciles, and domestic animals. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a quote by C.S. Lewis. It's one of my favorite ones because it speaks directly to a very deep distrust that I have in government. It should be no surprise that in the modern era, all governments are comprised of mostly moral busybodies. A bunch of people who believe in their own minds that what they're doing for the good of the people. And if the people don't agree, it's simply because the people don't understand. As C.S. Lewis puts it here, it is to put us, the people, on the level of those who have not yet reached the age of reason, like infants, imbeciles, or domestic animals. This is how the government treats us, and this is oftentimes how the government tries to solve our problems, by telling us that what they're doing for the good of everyone, and that if we don't understand it, it's merely because we're not intelligent enough to do so. Well, the video today comes very much in the exact same phrasing of that, where the South African government is now planning jail time and fines for people under its new emissions rules. Now, the emission rules themselves are completely irrelevant because they will change. They will continuously come down in size and scale until every single industry is effectively squeezed to the max in order for the South African government to basically play big boy on the world stage. When you look at this, for example, the South African government proudly boasts of this new energy efficient facility that they're going to be building and that they're going to be putting out there. And this is going to put South Africa on the world stage. South Africa is going to be a world leader in the fight against global emissions. It's even prevalent when you find that people who are going to be benefiting from this very directly are celebrating it, saying that the G20 may in fact mark the turning point of South Africa and Africa in the world, where Africa becomes a central player in the fight against global emissions. Now, of course, the problem with all of this is that there is no global emissions crisis. All of the research that we find continuously get everything wrong. When you look at every single data scientist that claimed literally since the 1980s that the world will end in about a decade, they've all been wrong. You can go back as far as the 1980s to find research studies that show that within the next 10 years, global temperatures will rise by 1 to 1.5 degrees. It turns out that even now, almost 50 years later, global temperatures have not risen at all. As it turns out, what happens is it will rise in some areas and then cool down in others, keeping the average temperature pretty much stable across the board. You see, the problem, of course, is that all of these governments have found a new way to basically advance their own power. It is emissions. You see, this is an invisible enemy. It's an enemy that you can point people towards and say, "Oh, look, this is terrible. We should absolutely try and fix this." And if the people say, "Well, hold up, what?" You can just make up a bunch of stuff, because the problem is no one knows. No one really knows what's going on, and no one really wants to do a lot of the research on this to actually find out what it is that's happening in the country. But okay, if we go back to this story, South Africa plans jail time, fines under new emissions. You'll find right at the end of the article here that it says that any company that emits more than 30,000 tons of greenhouse gases must submit to annual targets and report on compliance and future plans to reduce emissions. Executives can face fines of between 5 million and 10 million rand and imprisonment of as long as 10 years for first and second offenses. Now, one of the first things that really annoy me on this is that Europe is at the forefront of forcing Africa to do this because Europe already is advanced economies, right? They already comprise of a bunch of advanced economies where the European nations have largely shifted away from production of anything towards service delivery because that's what most advanced economies become. They simply offer services. Those are, generally speaking, not anywhere near as energy intensive as actual factories, actual mines, and actual industry, which is how countries go from being developing nations to developed nations. You see, what happens here is that Europe wants to cut the throat of Africa before Africa ever even has the opportunity to walk. That's all this is. Europe is saying to Africa, well, actually, no. We got very rich using coal and using gas and all the rest of it. In fact, Germany still burns millions and billions of pounds worth of gas every single year. But Germany wants to tell us here in Africa that no, 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 you guys don't get to play. No, no, no. Sorry. You have to switch to solar and wind. Well, okay. So can we actually switch to solar and wind? You might say, but Stefan, hold on. We have a lot of solar. We have sun, right? We're in Africa. We also have a lot of wind. You go to Cape Town, the Western Cape, there's a lot of wind there. Well, yes and no. So first, the wind that is in the Western Cape, not always great. While there's a lot of wind, there's not a lot of clean wind everywhere in South Africa. Where there is clean wind, they're already building a bunch of these wind farms in the hopes of actually being able to generate enough electricity. Solar is great. The problem in South Africa, more often than not, is that it's too hot. And the solar panels tend to suffer when it's too hot. You sort of want a brilliant amount of energy or amount of heat in order to get the maximum out of your systems. Not to mention that you have, specifically during summer in a lot of places in South Africa, a lot of rain, a lot of thunderstorms, a lot of cloudy days where the solar farms won't be doing as well. Winter, probably a little bit better. But there's a bunch of other problems. When you actually go and look at the studies that's been done on this, you find that geophysical constraints on reliability of solar and wind power worldwide. This is a study. If future net zero emissions energy systems rely heavily on solar and wind resources, spatial and temporal mismatches between resource availability and electricity demand may challenge system reliability. Using 39 years of hourly reanalysis data, we analyzed the ability of solar and wind resources to meet electricity demand in 42 countries, varying the hypothetical scale and mix of renewable generation, as well as energy storage capacity, assuming perfect transmissions and annual generations equal to annual demand, but no energy storage. We find the most reliable renewable electricity systems are wind-heavy and satisfy countries' electricity demand in 72 to 91% of hours, and then 83 to 94% by adding 12 hours of storage. Yet even in systems which meet more than 90% of demand, hundreds of hours of unmet demand may occur annually. What does this mean? It means that even if you switched entirely to solar and wind, there would be hundreds of hours a year where you just won't have electricity because it just doesn't work. Of course, the studies just continue. This study here, wind and solar energy droughts, this actually presents massive seasonal challenges because while, yes, there are a lot of wind all over the world and you can build these wind farms, countries experience things like droughts where there's just no wind at that time for years on end, maybe. Also, shifting climates may mean that where there once was wind, there's no longer that much wind. Looking at this, for example, why wind and solar need natural gas. In this study, they actually found that no matter how they crunch the numbers, no matter what they try to do, wind and solar will never satisfy the actual energy demand of an economy, specifically when we're talking about an economy at scale, right? When you're trying to build factories, when you're trying to build mines and stuff, wind and solar just does not work. The other problem, of course, is when you're talking about batteries, because the biggest problem with wind and solar is you need a way to store it. Well, the issue there is we have not found any cost-effective way of actually scaling up these battery technologies. If anything, if you're actually trying to do that, you look at this study, for example, done by the National Library of Medicine, where they looked at energy storage in New England and found that it's impossible to build energy storage at scale large enough to actually supply electricity to a country when that country requires energy most. You see, wind and solar are pipe dreams. They're never actually going to work. Elon Musk loves dreaming about a future where all of us are just running on solar, but that future will not happen. The South African government, for their part, are dreaming of ways of showing the world how amazingly advanced we are. We tried it with the economy. The problem is no one in power knows how the economy works, and so they gave up on that idea. The economy just needs to die. Then we tried to do it by being a communist leader. The problem is no one in government wants to stop stealing, and so being a communist leader becomes very difficult because while you should be stealing as a communist leader, you should first industrialize your nation and then you start robbing people blind. You should also build a bunch of prisons and open air stuff. And, the South African government's a bit struggling with all of this. They'll get there maybe at some point. So we ultimately said, you know what? What can we be a global leader on? We know destroying our economy. That sounds like a great idea. We're doing that already, right? Just without even trying, we're destroying the economy. We could do that faster. We think we're uniquely placed in this world with a unique set of skills that we could absolutely destroy the economy of South Africa a little bit faster. And so, we're running it back. We're going to be trying our best. It will work because any country that switches to solar and wind will ultimately come to a standstill. And when that happens, there will be hell to pay, right? This is what will happen. We're not building any new coal power plants. We're not building any nuclear power plants. We don't really have any gas power plants. So fundamentally, South Africa has no backup. Once most of our coal power plants go offline, and most of them are basically planned to go offline within the next 10, 20 years, once that happens, South Africa will be entirely reliant on solar and wind, and solar and wind will be entirely insufficient at actually providing the energy that South Africa needs. But hey, at least we're transforming our landscapes into hellholes with wind farms and solar farms taking up space where nature once used to be. This is just the lie that is green energy, and sadly, that green energy lie appears to continue at pace. Let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about all of this. Do you agree? Do you actually think that we should care about this stuff and we should go green and all the rest of it? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, hit the like if you liked, the dislike if you didn't, and leave a comment if you think that I do good work and you like the content that I make and you want more people to see it. Your comments and your subscriptions, it does absolutely help. Then if you want to support this channel a little bit more directly, $3 a month over on Patreon gets you ad-free viewing of all of my content. Link in the description down below, or simply hit the join button below this video. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. A peace.